I was so excited. This was my first trip to the United States, and I was traveling alone. My English was not very good, but I thought it was enough. I knew how to say, "Where is the bathroom?" And "Can I have water, please?" I thought it would be easy. When I arrived at the airport in New York, everything looked so big and busy. There were many signs in English, and everyone was talking very fast. I felt nervous, but I told myself, it will be okay. You will learn. After resting in my hotel, I decided to go to a restaurant. I wanted to eat American food. The waiter came to my table with a big smile and said, "Hi, my name is Jake, and I'll be your server today. What can I get you to drink?" He spoke so fast. I only understood the word drink. I smiled and said, "Water, please." Jake brought the water and gave me a menu. I looked at it, but there were no pictures, only words like grilled chicken breast and BBQ ribs. I thought chicken sounds safe, so I pointed to the item that said chicken breast. But then I felt embarrassed. The word breast was hard to say. When Jake returned, I tried to explain, "Can I have the, chicken part?" Jake looked confused. "Which part of the chicken?" He asked. I didn't know what to say. "The soft one, the breast." Jake laughed a little but said, "Got it," and wrote it down. When the food came, it was not what I expected. It was chicken pieces on a salad. I ate it anyway, pretending everything was fine. After the dinner, I was tired and ready to sleep. I wanted to go back to my hotel, take a shower, and rest. But when I arrived at the reception, the man at the front desk gave me a note. It said, "Your reservation was moved. New address, 351 Madison Avenue. Check-in assistance available." I didn't understand everything, so I asked, "Moved? Why?" The man spoke quickly. I only understood the words "new location." I nodded and said, "Okay." I looked at the paper and opened my map app. The new address looked far, but I called a taxi. When the taxi arrived, I showed the paper to the driver. He smiled and said, "Madison Avenue? Got it." During the ride, the driver tried to talk to me. "Where are you from?" he asked. I smiled nervously. "Yes, it's different there," I said. He laughed, but I wasn't sure if I answered his question correctly. When we stopped, I looked at the building. It didn't look like a hotel. There were no lights, no signs, just a big dark door with the number 351 on it. I thought, maybe it's a special hotel. Small and private. I walked to the door and rang the bell. After a few seconds, a woman opened it. She had gray hair and a serious face. "Are you here for the meeting?" she asked. I didn't understand. "Meeting?" I tried to explain. "No, I'm here for, reservation." "Hotel?" The woman looked at me carefully, like she was trying to decide something. Then she opened the door wider and said, "Come in." Inside the room was dark. There was a circle of people sitting on chairs. They all turned to look at me. My stomach felt heavy. Something was wrong. A man sitting in the middle stood up. He looked at me and said, "Who is she? She doesn't belong here." I wanted to leave, but I couldn't move. The woman who opened the door said softly, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Sit down and join us." We were just getting started. My mouth was dry. The dark room was full of tension, and everyone's eyes were on me. The woman who had opened the door led me to a chair in the circle. I sat down, my hands shaking. The man in the middle stood up and walked toward me. His eyes were sharp and cold. "Who invited you?" he asked. I couldn't think of what to say. My mind was blank. Finally, I managed to say, I don't know. I'm not supposed to be here." The man frowned, and I heard whispers around the room. A woman sitting close to me leaned over and said to the person next to her, "She doesn't look like one of us." I felt sweat on my forehead. My English wasn't good enough to explain the mistake. Desperate, I pulled the note from my pocket and handed it to the man. I was sent here. It's a mistake. The man took the paper, looked at it quickly, and threw it onto a nearby table. A mistake, he repeated, his voice cold. No one comes here by mistake. My heart was racing, and the room seemed to get smaller. Someone turned off the main lights, leaving only candles to light the space. The shadows made everything look more frightening. A woman with a necklace of red stones leaned toward me and smiled. Do you believe in fate? She asked. I didn't understand the word fate right away. My brain was working slowly. Unsure of what to do, I nodded. Yes. I think so, I said, hoping it was the right answer. Her smile widened, but it wasn't friendly. Good, she said, because tonight your fate brought you here. I wanted to run, but my legs felt heavy. The man in the middle walked closer, holding something in his hands. He stopped in front of me and extended a piece of paper. Read this, he said. My hands were shaking as I took the paper. The handwriting was messy, and I couldn't understand most of the words. It was something about loyalty and commitment. I don't understand, I whispered, feeling my face grow hot. The group started laughing. It wasn't a nice laugh, it was cruel, like they were enjoying my discomfort. Of course she doesn't understand, the man said, looking around the room. She's not ready. The woman who had opened the door came closer and put a hand on my shoulder. You should go, she whispered. Her voice was soft, but there was something in her eyes fear. Before I could move, the man said loudly, she leaves when I say so. I froze. My heart was pounding. I didn't know if I would get out of there alive. I knew I had to get out, but the man's cold eyes and the silence in the room kept me frozen. The woman who had opened the door gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze, as if trying to encourage me. Her expression said, be careful. My heart was racing, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Sit down, the man said again, but my mind was elsewhere. I needed a plan. With my limited English, how could I explain that this was all a big mistake? I took a deep breath and, with a trembling voice, said, I think there is a mistake. I don't know this place. I just want to go back to my hotel. The word hotel seemed to make the group laugh. A woman with short hair and a sarcastic smile said, Hotel? You think this is a hotel? How cute. I felt my face burn with embarrassment. What did they want from me? The man stepped closer, his expression unreadable. You don't leave until you prove yourself, he said, his voice low but firm. Prove? I asked, confused and scared. He pointed to a small table in the corner of the room covered with a red cloth. Bring that to me, he ordered. My legs felt like they were made of stone, but I forced myself to move. The room was so quiet that I could hear every step I took. When I reached the table, I hesitated. Slowly, I lifted the red cloth and saw a small wooden box with strange symbols carved into it. The box looked old, like something from a museum. I picked it up carefully. It was heavier than I expected and carried it back to the man. My hands were shaking as I handed it to him. He opened the box slowly, revealing a shiny golden medallion inside. The medallion glowed faintly in the dim candlelight. The man picked up the medallion and held it out to me. Put it on, he said, his voice almost a whisper. I froze. Everything in me screamed not to touch it, but I knew I didn't have a choice. With shaking hands, I took the medallion and placed it around my neck. The metal felt cold against my skin, sending a chill through my body. The man smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Good. Now you're one of us. My stomach turned. What did that mean? My instincts told me to run, but before I could move, the man stepped closer and said something that made my blood run cold. You can leave now, but remember, we'll be watching. I didn't wait. I ran to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. When I finally stepped outside, the cold night air hit my face. For a moment, I felt relief, but then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw someone from the group following me. My steps quickened. The sound of footsteps behind me grew louder. I didn't dare look back. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breathing was fast. Someone was following me, and I had no idea what they wanted. I turned a corner and found myself on an empty street. There were no cars, no people, only shadows. My hands were shaking as I tried to pull out my phone from my pocket. I needed help, but who could I call? I didn't know anyone in this city, and my English wasn't good enough to explain what was happening. Finally, I opened my map app, but my hands were trembling so much that I couldn't type. The footsteps grew closer, and then I heard a voice. Wait. I froze. The voice sounded familiar. Slowly, I turned around and saw the woman from the building. She was breathing hard, like she had been running to catch up with me. Please, I'm not going to hurt you, she said, raising her hands to show she wasn't a threat. I stared at her, unsure if I could trust her. My whole body was tense, ready to run again. Why are you following me? I asked, my voice shaky. She glanced around nervously, as if checking to see if anyone else was nearby. Then she whispered, I had to make sure you got out safely. Safe? From what? I asked, still confused. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. From them, that group, they're not what they seem. And now they think you're one of them. Her words made my stomach drop. What does that mean? One of them? I'm not. She interrupted, looking over her shoulder again. We don't have much time. Listen to me carefully. You need to leave this city. Tonight. Leave? My mind was spinning. Leave? But why? What did I do? You didn't do anything, she said, her voice urgent. But by putting on that medallion, you became part of their ritual. I think you're loyal now. If they find out you're not. She didn't finish the sentence, but her silence said everything. She handed me a small piece of paper with an address written on it. Go here. It's a bus station. Take the first bus out of the city. Don't tell anyone where you're going. I wanted to ask more questions, but she stepped back quickly, as if she was afraid of being seen with me. Before I could say anything, I heard footsteps again, this time from a different direction. My heart sank. Someone else was coming. Run, the woman whispered urgently, and I didn't wait. I ran as fast as I could, clutching the piece of paper tightly in my hand. The medallion around my neck felt heavy, like it was pulling me down, but I didn't stop. I just kept running, hoping I could find a way out before it was too late. With the piece of paper in my hand, I ran as fast as I could. My legs were weak and my lungs burned, but I didn't stop. The sound of footsteps behind me grew softer, but I was too scared to slow down. The only thought in my mind was reaching the bus station. After what felt like forever, I saw a small building ahead. It had dim lights and a flickering sign. This must be the station. I stumbled inside, trying to catch my breath. The place was almost empty, with just a few broken chairs and an old man sitting behind a desk. I walked up to him and handed him the paper. I didn't trust my voice to speak yet. He looked at the address and then at me, raising an eyebrow. Where do you want to go? He asked. My mind went blank. I didn't know the name of any cities, and I didn't care. I just needed to leave. Anywhere, I said softly. First bus. The man shrugged and typed something into his computer. After a moment, he handed me a ticket and pointed to a door. Gate 3. The bus leaves in 10 minutes. Thank you, I whispered, clutching the ticket like it was my lifeline. I walked to the gate, sat on a bench, and waited. My hands were still shaking, and my eyes kept darting to the door, expecting someone to burst in and grab me. When the bus finally arrived, I climbed aboard and chose a seat in the back. I sank into the chair, trying to calm my breathing. As the bus pulled away, I looked out the window. The dark street outside was empty, except for one figure. It was the woman who had helped me. She was standing under a streetlight, watching the bus leave. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and she gave me a small nod. Then the bus turned a corner, and she was gone. For the first time that night, I felt a tiny bit of relief. Maybe I was finally safe. The bus was quiet, and most of the passengers were asleep. I leaned my head against the window, staring into the darkness. My fingers brushed against the medallion around my neck. I had forgotten it was still there. It felt heavier than before, as if it was trying to remind me of something. I held it in my hand and studied it under the dim light of the bus. The strange symbols on its surface seemed to glow faintly. I couldn't understand why, but it made me uneasy. "Nice necklace," a voice said from behind me. I froze. Slowly, I turned around. A man was sitting a few rows behind me, smiling. I hadn't noticed him before. My stomach dropped. "Where are you going?" He asked casually, but his eyes were sharp, watching my every move. I didn't answer. I turned back to face the front, pretending I hadn't heard him. My heart was racing again. Who was he? How did he know about the medallion? I needed to stay calm, but deep down, I knew the danger wasn't over. I tried to ignore the man sitting behind me, but his voice kept echoing in my mind. "Nice necklace." How did he know about it? Was he part of the group? My chest tightened, and I couldn't calm down. I stared out the window, hoping to focus on the dark trees passing by, but I could feel his eyes on me. My hands gripped the medallion tightly. It felt like it was burning my skin, but I couldn't let go. Then I heard him move. His footsteps were slow and deliberate as he walked closer. My breath caught in my throat. He stopped next to my seat and leaned down slightly, his face calm but his eyes intense. "May I sit here?" he asked, but he didn't wait for an answer. He sat down beside me. Why are you here?" I asked, my voice trembling. He smiled faintly, but it didn't feel friendly. "Oh, I'm just traveling," he said casually. Then his eyes locked on the medallion. "But you seem special." My hands gripped the medallion tighter. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to sound brave. The man laughed softly and leaned in closer. "Don't play dumb," he said. "That medallion isn't just a necklace." "You don't even know what it means, do you?" I didn't respond. My mind was racing. What did he know about it? Why was he following me? "You can't escape it," he said. "Once you're marked, it stays with you. Forever." The word marked made my stomach turn. What did he mean? "I don't want this," I blurted out. "I just want to go home." The man leaned back slightly and gave me a cold smile. "Too late for that. You're part of this now." Then, without another word, he stood up and walked back to his seat. I turned to look at him, but he was sitting casually, staring out the window as if nothing had happened. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking as I looked down at the medallion. It felt heavier than before, like it was pulling me down. Suddenly, the bus began to slow down. We were stopping at another station. I stood up quickly, grabbing my bag. I didn't care where I was, I just needed to get off this bus. When the doors opened, I stepped out into the cold night air. The station was small and quiet, with only a few flickering lights. I looked around nervously, expecting the man to follow me, but he didn't. For a moment, I felt safe. But then I noticed something strange. The medallion around my neck was glowing faintly, and it felt warm again. My heart sank. What was happening to me? The bus station was quiet. Too quiet. I looked around and saw only a small building with dim, flickering lights. There were no people, no sounds, just the cold air of the night. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, feeling a chill, not just from the cold, but from fear. I walked into the small building. It was empty except for a few broken chairs and an old counter. Behind it, there was no one. The silence was heavy, and the only sound was the faint buzz of the lights above me. Hello? I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. No answer. Suddenly, I felt the medallion around my neck grow warmer. I touched it with my hand, and it almost felt like it was vibrating. It was like it was alive. My stomach churned. Why was this happening? What was this thing? Before I could think more, I heard footsteps behind me. My heart stopped. Slowly, I turned around and saw an old man standing in the doorway. He wore a dusty hat and had a tired look on his face. Lost? He asked, his voice rough. Yes, I said, my voice shaky. I need help. Where am I? The old man looked at me closely, his eyes narrowing as he studied my face. Then his eyes moved to the medallion. His face changed immediately. His expression turned pale, almost afraid. Where did you get that? He asked, pointing at the medallion. Someone gave it to me, I said, trying to explain as simply as possible. He shook his head slowly, his face serious. You shouldn't have that. It's not meant for you, he said, his voice low. Then take it off. I pleaded, pulling at the medallion. I don't want it. The old man stepped back, raising his hands. I can't touch it. No one can except those who are marked. The word marked made my skin crawl. Marked? What does that mean? I don't understand. The old man let out a deep sigh, as if carrying a heavy burden. Listen, girl, that medallion is a key. It connects you to them. If you have it, they will find you. Always. I felt dizzy. Who are they? What do they want from me? The old man hesitated. He looked at the door as if expecting someone to walk in. They are not people you want to meet twice. If you want to survive, you need to destroy that medallion. Destroy it? How? Before he could answer, I heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. The old man's face turned pale again and his hands trembled. They've found you, he whispered. Run. I didn't wait to ask more questions. I turned and ran out the back door of the station. Behind me, I heard voices and footsteps coming closer. The medallion felt heavier than ever, like it was pulling me down. But I kept running. I had to escape before it was too late. I ran into the dark forest behind the station. The trees were tall, their branches like fingers reaching for me. The ground was uneven, full of roots and rocks. I stumbled and almost fell, but I kept going. My heart was pounding, and my breathing was loud in the silence of the night. Behind me, I could hear voices and footsteps. They were getting closer. Don't let her get away, someone shouted. I didn't stop. My legs felt heavy, and the medallion around my neck felt even heavier. It was like it was pulling me back, but I couldn't stop. I had to keep running. Finally, I reached a clearing. The moonlight lit up the area, and I saw something strange in the center. It was a large, flat stone, like an altar. Carved into the surface were symbols, the same symbols as the ones on the medallion. My stomach twisted. Was this a coincidence? Or was the medallion leading me here? I didn't have time to think. The voices behind me were louder now. I looked at the stone again and made a quick decision. I took the medallion in my hands and placed it on the stone. To my surprise, the medallion began to glow. The symbols on the stone lit up too, as if they were connected. The air around me felt heavy, almost electric. My fear grew, but I couldn't move. Then I heard footsteps enter the clearing. I turned and saw him, the man from the bus. He stepped out of the shadows, his face calm but serious. You can't run from this, he said, his voice quiet but full of authority. Leave me alone. I shouted, trying to sound brave, but my voice shook. He walked closer, his eyes focused on the medallion on the stone. You have no idea what you're holding, he said. That's not just a necklace. It's a bond. Breaking it has consequences. My hands trembled. I don't want it. I don't want any of this. I yelled. Too late, he said, his voice cold. You're already part of it. I looked around, desperate for a way out. Then, from the shadows, another voice spoke. She doesn't have to face this alone. I turned and saw her, the woman who had helped me escape. She stepped into the clearing, holding something in her hand. It was a small bottle, and it glowed faintly, like the medallion. Step away from her, she said to the man, her voice steady, or you'll regret it. The man hesitated. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. You think that will stop me? He said, but his voice wasn't as strong as before. The tension in the air was thick, and I could barely breathe. I didn't know who to trust or what would happen next. All I knew was that this wasn't over. The clearing was silent, but the air felt heavy, like something big was about to happen. The man from the bus stood still, his eyes fixed on the woman holding the glowing bottle. He didn't move, but I could see the tension in his face. You think that will stop me? He said, trying to sound confident. But there was a hint of fear in his voice. The woman stepped closer, her eyes never leaving him. If you come any closer, I won't hesitate, she said firmly. I stood frozen, my eyes darting between the two of them. My hands were shaking, and the medallion on the stone continued to glow softly. I didn't know what to do, but I could feel that the situation was about to explode. The man suddenly turned to me, pointing at the medallion. Do you even know what you're doing? He asked. That medallion is a bond. It's power. If you destroy it, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Don't listen to him, the woman said sharply. She looked at me, her voice softer now. You have to break it. It's the only way to be free. Break it? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes, she said. Smash it against the altar. Do it now. The man stepped forward, his voice rising. If you destroy it, there's no going back. I didn't know who to trust. My head was spinning, but I knew I couldn't stay like this. I reached for the medallion on the stone. The moment my fingers touched it, a wave of heat rushed through my body. Images flashed in my mind, people in dark robes, strange rituals, and the glowing symbols on the stone. I didn't understand what I was seeing, but it terrified me. Do it, the woman shouted. With all the strength I had left, I lifted the medallion and slammed it against the stone. The sound was like thunder, loud and sharp. The medallion shattered into pieces, and the light from the stone disappeared instantly. The man screamed, dropping to his knees. It was like all the strength had been pulled out of him. He looked at me with fury in his eyes, but he didn't have the power to move. The woman quickly stepped forward and murmured something I didn't understand. The man collapsed to the ground, unconscious. I stared at her, my chest heaving. What was that? I asked, my voice shaking. She put a hand on my shoulder, her eyes full of sympathy. You just broke their connection to you, she said. They can't find you now. You're free. I looked at the broken pieces of the medallion on the ground, my body still trembling. And him? I asked, pointing to the man. He's powerless now, she said. It's over. The woman helped me out of the forest and onto a main road. She flagged down a taxi and handed the driver some money. Before I got in, she gave me one last warning. Go home, she said. Don't talk about this to anyone. Some things are better left forgotten. I wanted to ask more, but I was too exhausted. I nodded and got into the taxi. As it drove away, I looked out the window at the dark forest. I felt relief, but also a deep unease. I didn't know what had happened to me that night, but I knew one thing. My life would never be the same.
Thank you for watching. Enjoyed the story? Subscribe to learn English through stories. Like, turn on notifications and comment your city and country. See you next time.